Installed in my car. It's all open down here and open all around the edge, but it's really, really down there.
Okay, is everybody ready? Just need to squeeze through here.
Remember, we need short hours to stop by.
Yes.
Ranting and raving always good.
What's that?
Ranting and raving always good.
It's because I'm loud? Is that what you're saying? Before I was short, now I'm loud. All right, I got it. Well, we've got to quit meeting like this. I think it's like getting an every third day occurrence with everybody here. I debated whether calling a press conference today because we've been in the press so much, certainly in the last week. I wouldn't say this was a runaway train. I think it ended up becoming a very significant week, certainly for Mountainside, but really I think for the state of Arizona. As we were disappointed with the ruling today for a lot of the obvious reasons, first and foremost that our employees aren't going to be working, although still paid. Members will not have a place to exercise for at least the next 20 or so days. That was certainly disappointing. I think our case as far as the arbitrary nature of where Governor Ducey came from on this decision was very solid, and rather than focusing on the disappointment of the outcome of the ruling, I instead wanted to look at the significance of what the judge said and why. And I brought in our lead attorney, Joel Sanis, who represented us in the hearing and all the briefs, to kind of give some more detail on what we were actually happy with in Judge Thomason's ruling and the wording language that he used. So rather than talk a little bit more, I'd like to bring up Joel Sanders to kind of explain a little bit more in depth of the significance of the ruling today.
So the ruling held that Mountainside Fitness is not entitled to a temporary restraining order invalidating EO43 as it applies to fitness centers throughout Arizona. That's the disappointing part of the ruling. There was something very heartening about the ruling, though, and that is the language at page 7 and 8 and the final ruling at the last page of the order, where Judge Thomason recognized that businesses in Arizona have a procedural right to due process known as a post-deprivation right to be heard. And what that really means is that the state is going to need to become more precise in how it regulates businesses that want to stay open during the crisis. Businesses that want to stay open during the crisis are going to need to have safe protocols in place. And Judge Thomason commented that Mountainside Fitness does have safe protocols in place. At page 2, Judge Thomason said, "Plaintiff Mountainside was a good citizen that went above and beyond what was necessary to ensure the health and safety of its patrons and employees." So the significance of this ruling is that good citizens and good businesses are going to be able to establish a basis for being able to stay open. And that's going to be a challenge to the state. It's not going to be a simple process to implement the procedures that the executive order says will be adopted. And I know that Mountainside and EOS and other fitness centers like Orange Theory and Lifetime Fitness and Anytime Fitness, all of whom have been involved in one way or another in negotiations with the state in developing protocols, are standing ready and able to develop standards that will allow people to exercise and remain fit in a safe environment. We want to make this point, and that is fitness centers are health providers. That is what they function for. They provide a place for people to be fit and to stay in shape, and almost all centers want to reopen with the utmost safety for their members and their employees. So although we weren't successful in obtaining a temporary restraining order, the language that Judge Thomason used was that the state only needs to have rational speculation to support the closing of fitness centers. We knew that was the rule. We knew that was the law, and we had a heavy, heavy burden to overcome, and that would be difficult. But there is something very beneficial about this order for fitness centers in Arizona, that between now and July 27th, they are going to be allowed to establish the reasons why they should be allowed to stay open.
Joel, let me ask you a legal
Yes.
question here. As you know, those of us who cover courts know, preliminary injunctions are awfully hard to get, balance of hardships, it's irreparable damage, money's never irreparable damage. Given that you now have to go back, is this case basically moot? Because by the time you actually get before a judge, whether it's your new standards or anything else, this will all be over?
Well, because the order is, Executive Order 43 by its term says that the state is going to have an attestation process in place for businesses to establish that they're following the state's protocols. It's unlikely between now and July 27th we'd be able to obtain any form of remedy to allow fitness centers to reopen before that. So when you say moot, I'm not sure if it's exactly moot because that's a legal doctrine, but it may become moot. And I think it's probably the case that we're going to focus more on July 27th than on continuing to challenge this executive order.
Well, how quickly can you get back? Now you got to go through motion practice, discovery, everything else. I mean, really, how quickly can you get this case? I know we want a federal court, but how quickly can you get this case back before this judge?
We have a hearing, a status conference on July 9th, where we'll talk about the next steps in the case. And to be honest with you, we're just uncertain about what Mountainside Fitness or EOS, I can't speak for EOS, but we're uncertain about what Mountainside Fitness is going to do. The next steps could be to request a preliminary injunction hearing where we would have witnesses testify, especially the fitness centers testify to the extraordinary efforts they've made to make fitness centers safe. It's just a question of whether it's worth pursuing that end of it, which would have discovery. We would have depositions and likely document production requests. That could be done within a few days. I mean, it's difficult, but it could be done within a few days. If that's the route we take, then we'll let everyone know about that. But right now, we're still discussing what the next steps are.
I have two questions for Tom.
Sure.
The first one is, what happens to the employees here? You're going to have to lay people off now that this business is being closed?
No, what I said to the employees today is they don't have to go into work for the next 3 weeks, but we're going to continue to pay them. And I think that was, my thank you to them for the strength, courage that they had this week. This is an intense week for everybody. And the way they handled it, how they just showed up every day with a smile on their face, believing in what we were doing, obviously understanding that the cause grew bigger than Mountainside over this last week. I felt if we lost today, that their reward was to make sure that they're feeling safe, at least financially, for the next 3 weeks until we work to get reopened with the state.
Second question, just about this fight overall. I noticed that you're not wearing a mask. You fought to keep this place open despite the public health orders. You're not the only one. I meet a lot of people in Arizona who seem very reluctant to just accept these basic public health measures that other states have used to bend the curve. What is it about Arizona that makes people so hesitant to embrace some of these basic changes to their lives or to get this disease under control?
I can't speak about Arizona. I can speak that it's difficult to speak in front of everybody with a mask on for me, so I made that decision personally. Whether I walk around with the mask on, that's a different decision I have. But I can't speak for everybody in Arizona.
How can you afford to continue to pay your employees when you said the governor's order would cause irreparable harm?
How can I afford to do that? I made that decision to invest in them for what they invested in us. And the statement still stands. The harm isn't necessarily a financial harm because we're taking care of that. The harm is in the mentality for all businesses. The harm is on the low-ranging threshold that we discovered that our governor has, and most governors have. It's really low. The burden of proof to make an injunction like this happen to protect all businesses is so large for any business because the wide-ranging authority that we've given our governor is so great. That's the hard part, is because the mentality of everybody going, is it my business tomorrow that's going to wake up with that same wide-ranging authority that's arbitrary in its nature, very difficult to fight against, to change, for any employee, whether it's a Mountainside employee, a Lifetime employee, or the shop down the street.
Will you continue to charge memberships while you're closed?
We have not. In fact, we made a decision and announced to the members that we weren't going to charge them. And normally we would bill members on the 2nd. We announced to the members on July 2nd that we were not going to be billing them until we heard on this ruling. And then we also announced today that all memberships have been paused. So they're absolutely not. They had 7 free days. That's cool. But we're not going to be doing that. No, absolutely not.
So how much do you figure that you're losing? I'll use that term loosely.
Millions. I mean, we're probably in the 15 million range in the last 3 months, to be honest. We bill out millions. I mean, truthfully, somewhere in the $40 million range is what we bill out. So yeah, we've now had to be asked to shut that down 3 times. And all the expenses don't go away. And what I explained in the beginning, which is one of my fears, not only for certainly Mountainside, but for all businesses, certainly of our size, we weren't able to get any government assistance. So we're going to go round 2 on the 3rd month, no billing, still pay some employees, still have the responsibility to work with our landlords and our banks, some of the paying the electric bills that are still coming in and stuff like that. So the difficulties of that are certainly going to mount in all this as we move forward, but we're going to do it.
Let me ask one related thing. I wrote a story over the weekend about some lawmakers who want to trim the governor's powers on the emergency order.
Yes.
Talk about arbitrary in its nature. What's your thought? Do we need to recraft the laws in Arizona to trim the governor's power to shut down businesses?
Absolutely. The one thing that we uncovered in this, and maybe Joel can speak to it a little bit in more detail, was that there is a body inside the legislature that the governor is supposed to speak to. He's not required to answer to them. So if they disagree, he can go on his own way, but he is supposed to report to them. There is supposed to be minutes of that. That did not happen in this particular case. We definitely want to see that to grow, because there has to be a little bit of balance, because the threshold is so low for what our governor can do and how he can decide in the wide-ranging arbitrary decisions. There has to be a little bit of a balance to that, more than a little bit, a lot. And I think, as Joel was saying, there's so much significance in the language here. If anything, as a citizen, as a state, we can wake up and say, all right, we've learned something from this. We have to have a little bit more regulation, and some, I would say, clarity in how we work together going forward, and some checks and balances truly for our governors, so it doesn't happen like this again.
What exactly are, so we have a few weeks you're going to be shut down.
Right.
Besides legally, what are you doing to, I guess, to strengthen your cause? What's going to be?
Well, we're going to continue to work. We were really happy with the communication from all the health clubs here in the Valley. It was unbelievable, both locally and nationally, studios, everybody alike, and how they wanted to understand what they had done wrong, because we had the protocols in place. So everybody was kind of united, said, okay, if we can understand what we're doing wrong, let's work with the governor's office to fix it. I think that's more true today. We first want to understand, well, we had protocols in place, just like other businesses that currently have protocols. What happened to our type of business that said the protocols all of a sudden weren't working? We had, nobody got fined, other than Lifetime having their liquor license taken away compared to some of the bars. There was nothing out there. So I think we want to have a better understanding of where the governor's office was coming from. And then if there is some understanding, work together to clear that up, to move forward, so everybody works together going forward, because the pandemic's not going anywhere. How we function as a society together in it is what really this is going to be about, not just for Mountainside or fitness, but for all businesses.
Well, I guess the question is, I belong to a gym, not yours, sorry.
I'll forgive you.
I have a closer one to my house, moving. We've seen a lot of evidence that the virus can become aerosolized. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that, but you know what I'm saying. It's not just the 6 feet, it's the 30 feet.
Right.
You have a bunch of people next to each other, pumping out, breathing heavily. I mean, is it possible to do this safely, given what we know about aerosolized COVID-19?
Well, I think part of the distinction here is, I wouldn't say we really know about everything of this pandemic at all. I think we're chasing our tails a little bit. I think everybody's trying really hard, but like we were saying earlier in the week, there was no evidence that the spike came from health clubs, or because you're standing 6 feet and you're working out or on a treadmill 6 feet away from it. There's just nothing that proves that. What we do know is it's still spreading. There's theories as to why. I remember, 60 days ago that we were told that if it got hot, guess what would happen, right? We all forgot that. It's really hot right now. Guess what's happening? So that theory's not true. We've heard everything from being, on places that you have to clean. That was the first worry, to then airborne. I mean, everybody's just kind of chasing and reacting. I think if we just pause a little bit and stop the reactions and think slowly going forward, this jumping around and how it affects people in their work lives, certainly in their personal lives mentally, and how they're trying to go forward. So we can pause and go, okay, we might not know everything about everything, but this is how we can function together with what we do know as a society, not causing any more harm than we need to.
So you're not afraid of the virus then?
Did I say that?
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're saying that all the discussion about the things that need to be done, you don't know. I mean, maybe it's just theory, I don't know. I don't, give me your take. What do you think about the spike in Arizona, and what do you think Arizona should do about it?
Well, I think they're trying to do that. I mean, I don't want to get in too much into what I think Arizonans should do about it. I think it's interesting. One of the things that was called for when the beginning, all this started was, if you remember, more testing, more testing, more testing, right? So what are we doing now? More testing, more testing, and more testing. What we're also learning is people are out and about. People are living their lives. They're still going to work. They were still going to fitness centers up till a week ago. They're still going to dinner, and they're still going to Home Depot. That's happening. That's not going anywhere in this thing. So with more testing, people living lives, it seems obvious that more people are going to contract it, whether they're asymptomatic, they've gone through it. Heck, I'm sure a lot of people had no idea that they had it and felt it. We look at the death rate, we want to understand that and say, okay, per capita and what we're testing and who's having it, what's happening over here. Truly, what's the pre-existing condition? If somebody passes that has a heart condition and has also COVID, what are they putting on their certificate? COVID, right? So that didn't happen 90 days ago. it's happening now, which changes the mentality of everybody and going forward. That's where the pause and the reactionary chasing our tail needs to come in a little bit and say, we want more testing. We realize more people are going to have it. We realize people are still living their lives, whether it's in fitness centers or restaurants. Let's function knowing that and what the real fear is of it, and then go forward in it.
Did you have any employees test positive, and if so, do you have any idea how many?
Yeah, we answered that question last time. Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joel, let me ask you a question. Going back to the mind. I recognize this denial of the request for TRO only affects your clients. There are other gyms who have remained open. What do you think they should do now that you've at least got a published opinion? I mean, it's a real Superior Court's minute. But what do you think they should do? Is there a risk to them staying open after this is issued?
I think the first thing they should do is to read Judge Thomason's order, because it does really lay out the authority that the state has to adopt Executive Order 43. And they'll have to make their decisions on their own. As we know, the state has begun enforcement efforts. The enforcement efforts are real. The state may become even more serious about enforcement for gyms that choose to stay open and fitness centers that choose to stay open. And they have to evaluate the consequences, just as we have. There is a second lawsuit that's pending in federal court that's exponential. It's just an exponential lawsuit in federal court, and they have a temporary restraining order hearing, I believe, on Thursday or Friday in front of the federal district court. And the federal district court could come to a different conclusion. It's not bound by Judge Thomason's decision. So the question is still open. If the federal district court rules in favor of Exponential and the other plaintiffs in that case, the result could be completely different than what we have today. Gyms might be allowed to reopen if the federal court rules otherwise. It's just a very uncertain situation now.
Let me ask one, just technically, you mentioned 15 million, and you mentioned 40 million. I'm not sure what's a monthly fee, what's a...
Well, when we bill out, all of our members, so that's after you trim it down to the bottom line, so there's kind of the two things. I mean, we could just leave it at a whole heck of a lot, millions. I mean, truly is what we're losing, And it's not just about what Mountainside is losing, all fitnesses or business. I think that's something important. I don't want it to dwell on that. We'll handle our house, that's the truth in that, because it's really about all business. Whether it's my brothers and sisters, so to speak, in the fitness industry, large or small, we all have the same issue today. Same thing with the bars and what they're trying to figure out and function forward. And it's really about the decision process, the autonomy that we've given, the low-ranging thresholds that our governors have, and then how our business is supposed to function. Because I do worry about that for all of Arizona, just like we worry about the pandemic and whether somebody's wearing a mask or not. I worry about what other businesses might be subjected to this as well. I think, as you guys can see, we're not going to go away. This isn't, we're going to move forward in the process. Obviously, we want to move forward with the governor's office, but I worry about that for everybody and all businesses going forward, starting, tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Any other questions? You said that you were getting fined multiple times by Tops. Is that daily or is that once every month?
No, it wasn't daily, and we had some municipalities did fine us, and it was interesting. We had to learn together with the municipalities who they could fine. Actually, the fine actually goes to the individual, kind of like a traffic ticket. If you're driving the car, you're going to get the ticket, even if it's the passenger's car, right? So that's kind of what we learned, and the municipalities were learning as the police officers were walking in, wanting to cite, I use the term Bobby Smith at the front counter and saying, it's your problem that we're open. What we worked together with the departments was, it's not Bobby Smith's responsibility, it was mine, and I made that decision. So they kind of repointed it back at, obviously me and Mountainside, and they've been great. They've been, understanding the situation. It's very difficult for them. I want to thank them all. They were actually really, fair in all this. So I think we have 7, maybe 8, and again, not from all municipalities in that, so.
Have you paid any of those?
No, they're not due yet, I'm ready to, whatever that is, but, that'll be another time, I'm sure you'll hear about it. We won't have a press conference about it, but I'm sure you'll hear about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you all coming today and understanding the significance of what Judge Thomason did in this order today. It was bigger than a no, that's for sure, and we're real proud of everything we've done to this point. Thanks.
Right there, have a day.